Welcome to welcome to our first analysis stream of my recently published book, Dim Shadow of Spade. You want to buy it for yourself, you can buy it on Amazon. Ebook is live, costs $8. Paperback is live, costs $12. Hardcover is live, costs $17.80, and this is all in USD. I don't really know how much it costs in other currencies, but if you want to buy it for yourself, feel free to check it out. In the meantime, this this first video is actually going to focus on analyzing my book's concept of heaven. Heaven is obviously a location very prevalent in Christian, Judaism, Muslim. It's a pretty much is a place that pretty much everyone on Earth would know about. I am choosing, my story kind of focuses on the fictional conflict between heaven and hell, the fictionalized conflict between heaven and hell, between heaven's Hyde agency, higher investigations of demonic entities, and the demons of hell. This book is very complex, has many layers, and for that reason I decided I was going to make it like a little series to kind of explain like some aspects of the book, some characters of the book, as well as my goals in writing it. I'm also going to be discussing like what these characters, what these concepts look like in the beginning before it reaches the final product. And I will also be analyzing, making like part 2, part 3s, sequel videos to these things as the story develops. For this first video, Heaven actually had like a very interesting origin story. When I first started drafting it, I always wanted Heaven to be like very different to how people view it today in our world. Heaven is viewed as a perfect society, and like it's flawless. It's a place like reward at the end of the tunnel for someone who lived a long and good life. For most religious people, they believe that heaven is only reserved for people that believe and worship God. I'm choosing to do something different. Heaven is a place where people who lived good lives, whose good actions have outweighed their bad, and it's only those people that are admitting to heaven. People whose bad actions outweigh their good are sent to hell. I wanted to make heaven look good on the surface, but kind of has some issues under the surface, I guess I'll say. Heaven initially was designed to be like a place where it had like two different nations, two different countries. They're kind of at odds with each other. You can see the names of the two countries here. Initially, it was designed with one world, one country, Grayla, kind of having holding residents that lived during biblical times that did not like how people of modern times are more reliant on technology, and Daedros, who's kind of more for the modern people that were kind of more reliant on technology. And these two groups of people were often at odds with each other, and it ended up like getting to a point that by book 2 or book 3 there was going to be a massive civil war that took place in heaven, where these two people kind of collide and clash, and it was kind of like up to God and the protagonist to kind of break up the conflict. I decided against going with this for a couple reasons. One, I didn't like how essentially people of the old world were essentially, to lack of a better word, racist against people that lived during in the modern times. And I even created like a slur to use for the people of the old nation to use against people of the new world called Ger, G-E-R, which is the Hebrew word for outsider. However, one of the reasons why I kind of went against like one of the reasons why I had to change things up is because I didn't like how I created essentially a racial slur for people of the old world against people that lived in the modern times. The word was G-E-R, Ger, which is a Hebrew word for outsider. And I didn't like how similar it was to essentially a racial slur that's used against black people. So I changed that. I completely changed the whole like system of this, and now it's essentially like I ended up like creating like a document that kind of like describes like all the pros and cons, all this kind of stuff, and what I could do to end up changing things up. And I eventually kind of settled on a system where it looks perfect on the surface, but it does have its problems when you kind of look under it. Like the heaven may seem like a place that's at peace, but if you constantly look under the surface, you can actually see that there are some problems underlying it. Uh, uh wrong thing. So one of the first things I want to talk about was in regards to heaven. There's actually like different like organizations within heaven that just kind of keeps this thing running. One of the first things of heaven that is kind of important is the Elder Council, which is a sort of like a group of three men that was just sort of like that was initially essentially like a was inspired off the two king system of ancient Sparta. Sparta had like two kings that kind of ruled it, that just kind of like debated on like certain things to kind of keep the nation running. It was kind of inspired off of that, and essentially the Elder Council group of three men that were in charge of running heaven, and with one person kind of sitting above them that had the power to veto any decision they make, being God. Initially, the Elder Council was designed to have like the two leaders of the two countries that I mentioned before, and one leader that's sort of like meant to be the peacekeeper of the two nations. I kind of changed that. Instead, the Elder Council is kind of revolves around one person that is in charge of the Hyde Agency, these hero-esque group in my story, and he's responsible for protecting essentially the people of Earth. One elder is in charge of the Heaven's Guard, which I will discuss later, who is responsible for the protection of humanity, and the third elder, who is essentially like the human resources person. Anything that someone may have an issue with regarding heaven, they can report to him, and he makes sure that their needs are met. So these three elders kind of work together to try and decide like the events of heaven, like what the proper way to go forward on certain things. In my story, you first meet them when Aleclo goes to kind of plead his case in order to get him to just go after the antagonist Spade, who is a main antagonist of the story, and he was also motivated by the desire to find out what happened to his son who was missing. You can kind of see like him talking about it here. The Elder Council, though, is not a flawless organization. They can be manipulated by outside forces, and I will discuss those things later on in future videos. The Elder Council is not the only thing found here. There is also the Heaven's Guard. Heaven's Guard is sort of like the peacekeeper of trying to find it. Here it is. The Heaven's Guard is sort of like the peacekeeper of within heaven, that is kind of meant to be there for the people. They are essentially, they're designed with a specific purpose. One of the main flaws within heaven is that people who are there are just kind of meant to be happy. So positive emotions are amplified, and negative emotions are also amplified. You can kind of see this in effect with the first appearance of Janet, Alex's wife, who struggles with depression to the extent that she doesn't take care of her body. When you first meet her, she is skin and bones, and she is like that because she had depression over the loss of her son. That emotion, that feeling was amplified, where because she knew that she couldn't die, she just didn't really care for herself at all. And this is kind of one of the problems with heaven, that where negative emotions are amplified, and it's up to kind of the Heaven's Guardsmen to try and like placate them, to try and like care for these people that are kind of experiencing these things. If people are angry over something that someone else did, it is a Heaven's Guardsman's responsibility to kind of soothe their anger and just try to like placate them. Ideally, Janet would have been able to be kind of have her issues kind of resolved by Heaven's Guardsmen, because Alec at the beginning of the story had served as a captain of the Heavens Guards before he was accepted as a Hyde agent. And I'll discuss more about that at a later video. He knew the procedures towards caring for someone who has experienced this type of thing, but Janet was unwilling to kind of follow his advice. So this is kind of one of the problems that was kind of existent that kind of exists within Heaven, but also in a later series, in a later section, Georgie, one other character in my story, he is a character that is kind of struggling with the concept of loss. He had lost his fiance Victoria recently, who was a Hyde agent, and he was struggling with overcoming the concept of grief. So whenever he is reminded of Victoria, he's often like kind of overwhelmed by emotions, and he kind of finds himself being unable to stop himself from crying. And this, you can kind of see this happening here, where he was struggling to where heaven kind of caused him to just kind of be overwhelmed by his emotions, and he kind of breaks down to tears alongside Janet, who was kind of mourning what happened when she found out what happened to her son. Georgie is sort of like a very interesting character. I'm planning on doing something really big with this character as the series develops. But his story is kind of meant to be like a different view on Alec's story, I guess you could say. Whereas Alec could have the possibility of bringing back his family, Georgie can't, because his wife died of natural causes, and Alec's son Jacob kind of had his life stolen from him, essentially. So they're kind of going through culturally parallel stories, but kind of different routes. But anyway, like heaven affects people's emotions. Heaven affects people's emotional states, and it's kind of really up to the Heaven's Guardsmen to try and like placate them. In addition, something you don't really see in this book, but you will see in book 2, is the Angels of Death, an organization ran by the angel Azrael. The Angels of Death are people that constantly analyze the lifespans of every living person on Earth, and it is their responsibility to be there when someone dies and give them the choice. It's up. They essentially are responsible for taking someone to either heaven or hell, so long as they are ready to move on. They are unable to take someone to the afterlife if they have something they feel that is like an unfinished business. If they feel they can't move on because they're worried about their family, or they can't move on because it's something they want to see, something they want to experience. You can kind of see this in you can kind of see this in a little earlier section in part 1, where Alec and his partner Elizabeth ends up going and investigating sort of like a haunted house to try and gain information regarding a demon that he is tracking. You can kind of see examples of spirits that they were interacting with, and basically, if someone has a right to refuse to move on to the afterlife, and if they do, they're just gonna remain trapped in the place that they die until they're able to find a way to kind of settle their current like issues and be able to move on. That's kind of another one of the flaws within heaven is the angels of death don't really have the resources to be able to settle these people's problems on their own. They kind of need additional help, and unfortunately, they're unable to get help from the Hyde agency, for example, who definitely would have the resource to do that. Mainly because of the leadership that exists within heaven, within the Hyde agency, that would be kind of opposed to them working with the angels of death in order to solve this issue. This is kind of one of the flaws with my story's version of heaven, which stems from the leadership of heaven. The leadership of heaven is one of the many flaws within it. uh I would talk about like a lot of examples of some of the flaws, but they would kind of go into really heavy spoiler territory. Some of the things I want to talk about is actually ties to characters and events that I haven't really released yet, that I'm not really ready to write about yet. Like I want to talk about a character that you won't really see until firsthand until book 3, and understanding that character and their motivations will get you like a really good insight into why heaven is designed this way. Until we get to that point, then I'm gonna have to like end my discussion of heaven here. As the story develops, heaven will eventually change. Heaven's leadership will change. Heaven's will kind of be reworked to kind of serve a different purpose. But as of right now, as you continue reading this book and the series, you will see like acknowledgments of the flaws within heaven and certain characters' desires to change it. At the end of this book, even like Alec Lowe, the main character of the story, he expresses a desire to change the Hyde Agency. One of the main problems within my novel project, and how the Hyde Agency is kind of ran um, and uh, kind of ran and operates, I guess I could say. The Hyde Agency, one of the few things that I didn't talk about regarding Heaven, is an organization that existed for like 3,000 years. I kind of decided to do this mainly because of the fact that the first use of the word daemon, which is the Greek origin of the word demon, was from Homer's Iliad in 8th century BCE, so about 700 BC. This was the first ever use of the word daemon, which is the original word for the word demon. And for that reason, I think in my story, I decided to make like Heaven's Hyde Agency existed like roughly like 1,000 years before uh, BC. Mainly because the fact that this was the first use of the word demon, and it kind of makes sense that people would kind of be it would kind of make sense that demons would kind of originate at this time, because of the fact that this is the time when the word was first used, when people had a real understanding on what demon was. And also, the word daemon in Greek is actually kind of derives from the root word day, which means to divide, which I think is especially like very interesting in relation to my story. Uh, One of the since Hyde Agency was developed 1,000 years ago, it was also kind of developed under another example of a flawed leadership, I should say. And I'm not gonna get into too far into this because some of the information hasn't been revealed yet. But what has been revealed is stuff that was kind of introduced through Spade. See if I can find that scene. Uh, I use a lot of the word chaos. Here it is. So, this really like the history of heaven, the Hyde Agency was kind of introduced through Spade's uh section here, where he kind of mainly kind of goes into the history of hell as well. But Hyde Agency was created in response to demon activity on Earth. Demons' motivation on Earth was initially meant to be sort of like a social thing. They didn't want to attack humanity, but because of their monstrous appearance, humanity was afraid and they attacked them. And Hyde Agency was created as a response to their activity. Because humanity was afraid, the Hyde Agency was created to act and protect them. They didn't acknowledge, or they didn't really care that demons were initially kind of came in and interacted with people of Earth to kind of gain acceptance. They just kind of were acting and were killing and were capturing demons mainly to protect humanity. They had a very flawed origins, but as time progressed, their role in history has kind of solidified. Uh, they people most pretty much every single agent within the Hyde Agency, they believe themselves to be the heroes and that all demons are evil. And it's really only certain characters like Alec Lowe or Charlotte Matthews, who's another character you can be in the story, that are able to kind of acknowledge the flaws within the argument. They're able to kind of see that some demons are capable of good, and they're able to react accordingly. You can kind of see like the differences between Alec Lowe and Charlotte Matthews' mindset in comparison to how other Hyde agents react in part 3 of my book, when Alec meets Charlotte Matthews for the first time, and the Hyde agents that kind of gathered to aid Alec in his fight against Spade and his army. It is really kind of like a interesting concept in the sense, at least I think it is, in the sense that Hyde agents were kind of they are kind of like also like very flawed organization. Same with Heaven, but it's really mostly due to the leadership of the Hyde Agency that kind of caused them to be flawed, and both in relation to the elder that's in charge of them and essentially God that created them. I again, like, I'm not gonna like discuss like the character of God in the stream. I can reserve that for a later stream, but just know that the God you see in this story, in this book, is not the same God you see and you would see that created Heaven and that created Hyde Agency and Heaven in the past. They're essentially fundamentally different characters. They even go by different names, and I will be discussing those characters more in depth in a later video. In the meantime, kind of like goes through this kind of like covers pretty much everything about Heaven at this point. I think the next time that I will discuss Heaven, let's see. I may discuss Heaven again, maybe in book 3. Book 3 will have some interesting like narrative things regarding the history of Heaven, and it's also like in relation will connect to the expansion of the character of God. For next week's Dim 101 analysis stream, I'm going to be analyzing the character of Alec Lowe. Alec Lowe, once again, is a protagonist of my story, and he is kind of a deeply flawed character, and also kind of had like a major evolutions in his character. Same thing with Heaven. Alec Lowe is not the same character as he was initially designed. Funnily enough, he was initially designed to be a Wild West sheriff instead of a 1920s detective when he was alive. So that is completely different characters, completely different personalities, and you can kind of hear that more in next week's stream. And this will be on Wednesday from 1 p.m. to an undetermined amount of time. So the kind of ends it for this video on, and I'll be live next doing this analysis stream yet again on Wednesdays 1 p.m. To be determined Pacific Standard Time. I'll be hosting Wires Workshop streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time, and those streams I will be live streaming myself working on my next book. I will be streaming Far Cry 4 for 1% completion on Fridays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be streaming Just Cause 1 for 1% completion on Saturdays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. And I'm going to be streaming Borderlands 3 for 1% completion on Sundays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. That's going to do for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.